everyone. Gina, just to confirm, how should I do on time with sharing?
You have about 7-ish minutes.
Perfect. Yes. So I'll just start with introductions. My name is Ashley Rolon-Marlowe. I am the an admissions director for the School of Education, primarily focused on our graduate admissions process. So I've, read a lot of recommendation letters over time, and I love reviewing recommendation letters. I think it's really nice. You can really see the connections that people have with their recommenders through their letters. But sometimes, we do see very short letters, and that doesn't mean that a person doesn't want to support an applicant, whether it's to a job or a program as scholarship. It might just be that they don't really know what to write, or how to really express their recommendation for this applicants. So when it's asked to share a little bit about letters of recommendation, I thought of some general best practices to share. I also found a lot of resources, from different colleges where they have some templates and some other guidelines as well that might be helpful. So I'll drop those in the chat for everyone too, because I think, having something to take away to look at for later, especially when you're writing a letter, is always really helpful. And I'm really happy to have my other colleagues here who have experience, with recommendations in different contexts. While, my experience is mostly with education and counseling applicants, I think what I'll share is just very, very general. Just kind of pulling back important things that recommenders should ask for when someone says, "Hi, could you write me a recommendation?" Would be to ask for information about the programs that they're applying to. If they're applying to multiple programs at multiple schools, right, you're going to want to have a sense of, is this the same exact title? Am I submitting my letter to 4 different schools? Do I have to make sure I update, I'm recommending Ashley to, Hunter College versus Queens College? All those little things that just, help you through your tracking process. So just like I tell applicants to create like a tracking sheet of all of the programs they're applying for, all the deadlines, all the materials they need, I think as recommenders, if you're managing multiple people's recommendations at the same time, starting a tracker for yourself is also really helpful. So you can, log down the programs that people are applying for, the deadlines by which they should have their applications submitted and completed is also helpful, just so you can better manage your time. I think it's also good to get a sense of deadlines, because someone may say, "Hey, I'm applying for a program and the application is in 2 weeks." If you have that context and you know that you cannot do that, it's okay to say no, or it's okay to say, "Hey, you know what? I can definitely make this happen. I'll get it to you within a week." So those getting those details from the applicants, it will help you just have a better process and less guesswork on your end. I think other really important things to ask are, if you're unfamiliar with the field or the program that they're applying to, ask them for some details about that program. I would also suggest ask if they have a draft of their statement of purpose that they can share with you. Similarly, on the other end, I tell applicants all the time, when you reach out to a recommender, you should at least have a draft ready of your statement of purpose that you can share with them, so they have a sense of why you're applying to this program, what your motivations are, what those connections are, even if you haven't taught them in this particular field, right? Your field of research and teaching might be unrelated, but you can still speak to them as an overall academic student, and also whatever you've learned about their character, because that's also something that committees tend to look for. A sense about who they are as a person, as well as their academic attributes. Other things that might be helpful, if they don't have a draft of the statement of purpose, or you're just responding to them over email, ask them to highlight 3 attributes that they believe are most relevant to their application, right? Help them help you through this process as well, because there is a reason why they ask you to write them a letter of recommendation. And having them make those connections for you will also just help you kind of see those connections a little bit better as well. And it also helps for them to give you some ideas of what you could expand upon in your letter. And ultimately, right, when we're writing recommendation letters, we want to be positive, right? We want to provide, comments that highlight their growth, experiences that we've had with them that demonstrate that they're a really strong student, or demonstrate that they're someone who, in a group discussion, you notice that they're the mediator. They're the ones acknowledging everybody else in the room and bringing them together. Those little things, just really help to really highlight the positive recommendation you're providing. Another thing is, if you can't commit, or if you don't believe that you would be the best recommender for a person, it's okay to say no. Say no. It's okay to just let them know I can't do it. And when, we're talking with prospective students, we tend to tell them as well, even if you're nervous, reach out to a faculty member, reach out to an advisor. They may say no, and that's okay. But that's why we always tell people you want to get more than the minimum that you need, right? If someone needs 2 recommendation letters, they should be asking 4 or 5 people just to make sure they have the best supporters. So as far as what do you write? Typically, and I think, my colleagues may share more, when it comes to things like fellowships and scholarships, but generally for recommendation letters, you want to talk about your connection to the student, and why you think they would be successful if they're applying to a graduate program. Also, because you'll have some sense as to why they're applying to that program through their statement of purpose or whatever, email they sent you with attributes. Why do you think they will be successful in their career? Or how do you think that they would be a good fit for the career that they're interested in? Even if you don't have any experience in that career, right? They should be sharing some things with you to bridge those connections. So those are generally, some of the things that faculty might be looking for when they're reading someone's recommendation letters, because they're going to be looking at transcripts. They're going to be looking at the applicant's own essay, but it's really you as an external person who's saying, I recommend this person because in my experience in the course, they had 1 to 2 accomplishments, or I noticed that they had these specific character traits that I think would help them be successful. Right. So in your actual recommendation letter, right, you can think about different formats, right? Talking about their academics, their work ethic, highlighting about 2 or 3 examples of those accomplishments and those different traits as well. And then if you're writing a recommendation for someone who is going into a research focused program, why do you think they have their research potential? Additional context too that you can add into recommendation letters would be, how does this person stand out, right? If you compare them to other candidates in, their cohort or in their class, were they someone who really stood out to you for, their writing skills, their people skills, their ability to, make connections to the material in new ways? These are things that, they may remind you of, but you may also know when they reach out to you and you're like, yes, I'm excited to write this for you. Um, other things to keep in mind, also dependent on your own availability. But sometimes if you get an email from an applicant or an outreach, right, maybe offer a quick phone call or a coffee chat to just chat with them, get to know, what they're interested in, learn a little bit more about them. I will say from my own personal experience, reaching out to a former English professor at Hunter, we, had a great chat. We built up more chats. I ended up visiting her class to talk about like my career journey. So I think thinking of how writing recommendation letters may also help you and build better connections for your current students. That might be like a nice benefit that comes out of having these chats. And then I think as well, keeping your letters over time can help you build templates, right? So if you see trends that you're constantly writing letters for applicants in the health professions or applicants, students applying to business schools, right? Keep your letters so you can have those templates to go back to, that you have a structure already set up. So then you can fill in the more personal details that you get from the candidates. And then another thing too is ask your colleagues. I definitely recommend, right? We're in a really great collegial space right now. If you're writing a new kind of letter or you're writing your recommendation letter for the first time, ask someone else if they have something that they can share with you. And especially if it was someone who was successful, right? And getting into their program, right? Because you want to know what's a good letter. Something that, a letter that someone submitted and learn that the person got accepted is always great. And that might be something that you would decide to do too, right? You might follow up with your students and say, hey, did you get accepted? And kind of add that to your own little data to say, yes, this kind of letter must have been really good to add to their recommendation or to add to their application. So I'm just going to leave you with the resources I mentioned. I'm going to drop those into the chat. And there's 3 different links. So there's one that goes to UC Davis, University of Washington, and then Georgetown. And there's some different, suggestions for writing strong recommendation letters.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley. So, so helpful. I learned so much and I love the reconnection tip too. I did too. So amazing. Amazing. Thank you. And now Stephen and Corey, if you want to do your introductions.
Stephen, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Stephen Lassonde. I'm the director of the Office of Prestigious Scholarships and Fellowships. And thanks for that last presentation. That was so comprehensive. I'm wondering whether, the rest of us have anything to add. It's really well done, Ashley. Thanks. But let me see. Let me try to fill in here. I think one of the things that I want to pick up on was communication with the student, because oftentimes our students don't know how to ask for letters of recommendation. And I think part of educating them is helping them understand what can help us. So many of the materials that you mentioned are really important, but also it helps remind us of important things about the students. The most important thing about any letter of recommendation are the details that you put in that letter about that student, about your interactions, about your impressions of them in the classroom if you've taught them. You're expected to assess them, in terms of how they articulate themselves verbally, but also in writing, how they interact with others, their potential for academic or other qualities. And so part of what can help you is a conversation live, I would suggest, if possible, in person, because oftentimes it lends itself to more kind of open-ended discussion. And you can then be reminded of things that you thought were excellent about them that you can then use in your letters. Specific examples, as was discussed, is really important, so that you're not saying just that the student was really stood out and had the best grades, but what they did, particularly in class, that impressed you. That'll also help you as you're constructing your letter think of other examples, and that's what distinguishes a really good letter from one that's just not that helpful. Most of these, most requests for letters of recommendation ask for some sort of context for how you knew the student or how you know them. And professors in particular will start a paragraph with their class and what was so challenging about it. But I would suggest if you're writing a letter and it's a very long paragraph about your class, it becomes more and more about you and less about the student, and is not very helpful. It becomes kind of damning with faint praise then, because there's not much detail about the student, and it's really about you and how challenging and rewarding your courses are. So try to stay away from that. But it is important to give also context for the performance of the student. If it's possible to say, for instance, this student is among the top 10 that I've taught in the last 2 years, or top 10%, or whatever it is, that is always important. If you put, so that they have some sense of how you regard the student in the context of all the students you've taught or the ones you've taught in the last several years. That's always extremely helpful. Adjectives like hardworking, consistent, well-organized are not helpful at all. They're read as, again, damning with faint praise. I have an example, for instance, of a professor who wrote a letter of recommendation for a student who is regarded by the other two recommenders as among the best in their career, as, this student is hardworking and a consistent student. She turns in all of her homework, does well on it, and what she turns in is far better organized than most of what I see. It was a 1-paragraph letter of recommendation. I mean, I had to get another recommender for this student, and she got another outstanding letter. She had had 2 classes with this professor. One was a seminar, and he knew her well, and she felt like, she was highly regarded by him. So, I think it's important to know that if you're agreeing to write a letter of recommendation, you really have to lean into it. You have to be willing to do it. You have to feel like you know the student. And as was said before, if you feel you really don't know the student well enough, you're doing them a favor by saying, I don't think that I know you well enough to really do this in a way that you deserve. I think, maybe let's have a conversation about other people that you might ask who could be more helpful. And I'll end there because I think there's bound to be a lot of repetition in a session like this. And I'll just add resources on our website, the Office of Prestigious Scholarships and Fellowships. We have a section called resources for faculty, and on there I have a list of tips for writing good letters. So I think I'll hand it over to Corey.
Yeah, so thank you both. Again, I'm not sure what I'm going to be able to say that will be helpful. But what I will do are 2 things. One, some quick advice on what I think is helpful for me. I don't know if these are like universally applicable laws of writing a letter of recommendation, much less engaging in the process of doing it. Nevertheless, I think the main thing is meeting with the student either in person or over Zoom. The worst thing you could do is to accept to write a letter of recommendation for a student who you vaguely remember. And, obviously that's not good for you because whatever it is that you're going to write in the letter will sound equally as vague as your memory of that student. That's one, at least from personal experience. But then also, 2, you need to know what the student knows to just kind of echo what Stephen said. The student only knows what they know, right? They don't know what they don't know. So that involves you asking them about their future plans after doing the scholarship or fellowship, right? What are their short-term plans? Do they even have plans? Is that in their vocabulary, right? And what does that look like? But also, are they applying for the right scholarship or the right fellowship, right? Maybe they just need a bit more advice as well about maybe graduate school too. So I just sort of in this first instance recommend meeting with the student and just getting to know them and trying to understand what they know about whatever application process it is that they're about to get into. I certainly won't belabor telling folks, right, how to do their own research on fellowships and, being up to date on those things. But I will say this, always schedule a follow-up. Even if it's, a week later or 2 weeks later, as long as you meet with them a second time, I think, you can kind of in good spirits say, hey, like I gave this a good faith effort. I've met with this student multiple times. I think I have a pretty good picture of them. I can write this letter in good faith. And I guess I just sort of want to end by showing an example letter for a student that I wrote. Maria, she was at Baruch a couple years ago when I was teaching philosophy of law. She's now, this fall, she's a master's student in business and economics at the Nova School of Economics in Portugal. Anyways, so I just want to show it. I don't think it's perfect, but maybe there are some basic things that could be helpful. So the first thing that I always go for when I'm writing these letters is to make sure I have some kind of professional looking letterhead from the institution. It just looks good, right? Um, I think it's formal to, sort of like set it up like this, where you have the date, your name, your position, office. That's just how I set it up. And then of course address a committee, and then I spend a good sentence or two just detailing who I am and who I'm writing the letter for. Then, and maybe I'm actually doing some of the things Stephen said not to do, but maybe, this worked for the student. I don't know. Hear me out. In this longer paragraph, what I do is not only tell the committee what my class was about, but I try to tell them what my class is about while also showing how that student really excelled at those various activities, that I may have had, or maybe the reading. So, for example, I require students to carefully study the material, practice slow reading, and intensive writing. The writing for my courses is intensive because they require students to practice different styles of philosophical writing and to revise their work. Different styles of this kind of writing includes exegesis, positive and negative critique, and comparative analysis. Maria quickly grasped the art of carefully analyzing a philosophical text. Her writing exemplified this, since she always gave examples and carefully laid out her arguments. And so then I try to maintain this kind of flow as I'm writing the letter for the student, just so who's ever reading this can say, okay, they're not just sort of like faintly praising them, right? But they're also, saying like, here's how they did it, right? So yeah, and then I always try to, especially if I really knew the student, and by knew, I mean the student came to office hours and bugged me with emails all the time. I try to end with at least one sort of third paragraph that just really speaks not only to their intellectual performance, but just their moral character. What's their connection with the material that I taught in the class, right? Is this more than just a grade for them? Is this more than just another stepping stone? So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I hope that was helpful.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much. Yeah, that specificity is so good. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen and Corey and Kemile. And if you want to introduce yourself to Kemile.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kemile Jackson. I am the director of the Pre-Health Advising Office here at Hunter. So here in the Pre-Health Advising Office, we have what's called a pre-health file where we store the letters of recommendation for the students. And we utilize those letters to compose a committee letter, which is the official endorsement of their application to the health professions programs, specifically medical school, dental school, and optometry school. And then we have another option, which is called the letter packet, where we put together all your letters in a packet with a cover letter explaining that the student is in good academic standing at Hunter, and they've waived their right to view these letters. And so whenever you receive a letter of recommendation request from a student, it comes through a specific portal that is from the Pre-Health Advising Office. And so we are asking you to evaluate the student on their pre-professional competencies, some pre-professional competencies that they're expected to develop over time. So some of you might have received this request at one point or the other in teaching at Hunter, which I'm going to share on screen. Can everybody see this form here? And so you're expected to evaluate the candidate on their ability to be adaptable, if there's teamwork or any kind of team activity that takes place in the class, you're expected to evaluate them on that, accountability, their commitment to learning, their intellectual ability, emotional stability, maybe not so much, quantitative ability, empathy, their general judgment, professional demeanor, oral communication, written communication skills, their integrity and ethics, maturity, reaction to criticism, if there's any opportunity for them to possibly serve as your teaching assistant or recitation instructor. We expect that you would assess them on their leadership skills, as well as their time management skills, stress management skills, organizational, etc. So it's a very lengthy rubric that you're expected to complete. In addition to that, the core competencies that you're expected to discuss in your letter of recommendation, there are specific guidelines that you are given. And so I'm going to drop some links in the chat for you as well with that. So you have that. Sorry, I think my tab disappeared. So in terms of the science recommendation letters, which is the most important letter in the student's file, we expect that faculty will evaluate the students on specifically their intellectual ability, their analytical skills, as well as their ability to process or absorb information and apply it as well. So we've created because we understand that faculty have a very busy schedule, we've also created a template for them to use when they're writing these letters of recommendation. Most of the classes that, from my understanding, is that you'll have 800, 200 students in a science course. And so it's very difficult for you to really get to know the student. And it's also very difficult for you to meet with them individually, considering that Hunter has over 1,300 pre-health students that are applying to the various health professions graduate program. So one of the things that we've done is to create this template. And so basically the template will ask you to discuss your relationship with the student, how long you've known the student, the content of the course in terms of the rigor, and any specific contributions they have made in terms of class discussions, their preparedness for the work, their performance on the exams, as well as ranking them if they're in the top 1% of students you've taught in 25 years, top 5%. In addition to that, we'll ask or expect that you should indicate whether you're most enthusiastically, strongly recommending, or just recommending. So that these terms are very important. So if you say you're most enthusiastically recommending the student, that is the highest form of endorsement. These are universal terms that are used across the health professions. And so they understand once you say recommend that you're not really it's not the strongest of recommendation. So if you say I'm recommending Ashley for your program, that is like the lowest form. Strongly recommend, that's like the third level. Enthusiastic is the second level, and strongly or most enthusiastically is the highest level of recommendation that you can give to a student. Once we have your letters of recommendation, how we use them in the Kemile letter process is that we will attach up to 5 letters of recommendation, and then we will weave in excerpts from those letters into the committee letter. Some of the letters that we use, sometimes we will also, if the letter is really exceptional, we will go beyond and probably add a 6th letter. But generally, the committee letter itself, with your letters, quotes from your letters weaved in. Some of you are also probably familiar with course evaluation requests if you've had pre-health students in your classes, which is it's just specifically for you to evaluate their performance in the course. We also weave some of the excerpts from those into the committee letter to talk about their academic trajectory at Hunter, and how they're viewed across the disciplines by faculty, by the Hunter College faculty. So one of the things that you want to make sure is that the letter must be on letterhead. It must have a signature. Some health professions programs do not like digital signatures, so if you could refrain from using digital signatures, we would appreciate that. Also, try to be consistent. We've had letters where the letter starts off recommending Stephen and then end up saying, you know, Jeffrey will be a great candidate for your medical school. And it's like, oh, are we talking about Stephen or are we talking about Jeffrey? Or the pronouns are not consistent. It's he, she, they. Also, brief letters are really not helpful to the student because it demonstrates that you don't really have a relationship with the student and you don't really know much. If you're just saying, okay, Jeffrey has an A in this class, I think he's great, sincere, and you should accept him, sincerely, Professor X. Those letters are not helpful. So, you know, it's very important that you're able to write a full-length letter about the student. Also, it's not helpful in our case for you to talk about the student outside of context, which you don't know them. So, you know, yes, it's good that you have the personal statement. It's good that you have the resume, but the personal statement and the resume are also a part of the application that they have to submit. So you're not really adding any insight by rehashing it in the letter of recommendation. It's really not helpful. You really want to highlight the characteristics that you think make this student a good applicant for the health professions program they're applying to, and would also highlight also the characteristics that you want in your healthcare provider, right? It's helpful if you say, you know, and I would look forward to having this student as my physician assistant, my dentist, etc. You're expected to also talk about, you know, whether or not you think they have that potential to succeed at the graduate level as well. Okay, any questions? I think I talked too much.
No, that was amazing. So
Thank you.
good, so helpful. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's so interesting to hear from it from 3 different perspectives too. Like so interesting. So thank you, presenters. Yeah, mind blown. Wow, I learned so much. Like so much. My letters of recommendation are going to look completely different now. Exciting. Oh my gosh. All right, so we're going to open it up to Q&A for everyone. So if you have questions, please, yeah.